Trump returned from Asia talking about removing the filibuster to pass the appropriations bill and reopen the government. The conflicting desire of Senate Republicans to keep the filibuster was the topic of Sunday news programs yesterday morning. Today is Monday, November 3rd, and this is episode 10. Here we are, 33 days into the 2025 government shutdown. The argument is over failing to break the filibuster on an appropriations bill. The irony is that the bill is spending resulting from a budget reconciliation bill that bypassed the filibuster process. Not a single Democrat in either the House or the Senate voted for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or the OBBBA. So Trump is just asking the Senate to change the rules to approve its spending and finish this. Senate Republicans don't want to cancel the filibuster. In this one case, I agree with Trump on the process. From CNN's reporting of Trump's post on Truth Social.
President Trump is now calling on Republicans to go nuclear. The president posting online, "It is now time for the Republicans to play their Trump card and go for what is called the nuclear option. Get rid of the filibuster and get rid of it now." The filibuster requires 60 votes to pass funding to reopen the government. Getting rid of it would mean Republicans could pass the bill with a simple majority vote.
I, for one, just want to get rid of the legislative filibuster. The first thing, as it's important to note, is that the Constitution called for the legislative branch that actually gets things done. The Constitution was written in 1787 in response to the Articles of Confederation, ratified in 1781, that originally required the Continental Congress to pass laws with a supermajority, or 9 out of 13 states approving a law, and this Continental Congress was plagued with legislative gridlock. In response, the Founding Fathers set up Congress to pass laws with a simple majority, including even in the Senate, where it was clearly written that the Vice President of the United States could break any ties. This isn't just my opinion. This is basic history, as even taught on PBS.
Part of the reason our founders replaced the Articles of Confederation with the Constitution is that with the Articles, it was hard to get things done. Passing laws required a supermajority. So in the Constitution, its authors only named 5 things that require a supermajority in the Senate. But everything else was expected to be done with a simple majority. Because in the Senate, they gave the Vice President the ability to break a tie. And I'm not a mathematician, but if one person has the ability to break a tie, then the only possibility is that they're doing it with a simple majority and not a supermajority.
Not everything in Congress requires a 60-40 vote anyway, because some things couldn't just afford to be held up in a filibuster. In 1973, rules were changed so that critical measures, including budget reconciliations, could be passed with a simple majority without accommodating the rules of a filibuster. As such, OBBBA was packaged as a reconciliation bill and passed with a simple majority, 51-50. Vice President J.D. Vance broke the tie. While I don't agree with the content of the OBBBA, the passing was consistent with the processes outlined in the Constitution to move business along. Starting in 2013, Senate rules were changed so that things like cabinet appointees could be done without a filibuster. This was initiated during the Obama administration, but even today, Republicans benefit from this removal of this filibuster for cabinet appointments. There are multiple examples of current cabinet members that were confirmed with far less than 60-40 votes and without a single vote from Democrats. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was confirmed on a 51-50 vote with a tie-breaking vote from Vice President J.D. Vance. All Democrats voted not to confirm him, and they were joined by 3 more Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. FBI Director Kash Patel was confirmed with the 51-49 vote, with all Democrats voting against him. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins joined the Democrats. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. was a similar case where he was confirmed 52-48 vote, with all Democrats voting against the confirmation, joined by just one Republican, Mitch McConnell. Again, in all of these cases, Republicans benefited from the lack of filibuster to push a partisan agenda. Starting in 2017, Republican senators changed the filibuster to allow for Supreme Court nominations to happen without a filibuster. And this is the reason that we have Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. And it's the result of a simple majority, not a 60-40 vote. Neil Gorsuch was confirmed 54-45, with only 3 Democrats voting to confirm him. Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed 50 to 48, with only one Democrat voting to confirm him. Amy Coney Barrett was the most partisan confirmation, being confirmed with a 52-48 vote, with no Democrats voting to confirm her. One Republican, Susan Collins of Maine, even sided with the 47 members who caucus with the Democrats. Again, all these Supreme Court justices were confirmed without a filibuster. I am not against this procedurally, as the Constitution calls for majority rule. Of course, John Thune, Speaker of the House, and Mitch McConnell, former Speaker of the House, are both against getting rid of the filibuster legislative actions. They claim it's to prompt bipartisanship and compromise. Don't believe it. This is Speaker John Thune, again repeating lies.
You don't hijack the federal government to try and create $1.5 trillion in new spending, free health care for non-citizens, and you can go right down the list. I mean, this isn't even realistic. I mean, they're not serious people.
Note that this is new spending, as these ACA subsidies were already in place as a result of the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021 and were extended by the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. The discussion was not net new spending, but whether to extend subsidies. I've mentioned before that extending these subsidies is what the American people want, making up 3 in 4 adults who support extending these subsidies, including 59% of Republicans and 57% of MAGA supporters. Moreover, Thune is following an RNC playbook, claiming that Democrats are trying to push health care benefits for illegal aliens. This is just false, and yet he says they're not serious people. Even while supposedly negotiating, the leadership is not doing so in good faith, both lying about spending and falsely claiming benefits for illegals and calling Democrats not serious people over an issue supported by the majority of Americans. While I remained hopeful at one point that the filibuster could promote bipartisanship, these players have not hesitated one moment to promote a partisan agenda in other realms, including budget reconciliation, cabinet appointees, and now Supreme Court justices. They have also not hesitated in allowing the Trump administration to write executive orders. Rather than letting Congress do the work of writing the laws, the Republican members of the House and Senate have chosen not to go about the business of bipartisan negotiation and compromise, instead defaulting to Trump to write executive orders right out of the gate. So why do Republicans like the filibuster for legislative actions? Why are they even letting themselves get bungled up on this appropriations bill? There are 2 reasons. In the short term, they are trying to divert attention from the unpopular pillars of the BBBA bill itself, and they are instead trying to shift blame to Democrats for shutting down the government. In the longer term, they don't want to be in the position of doing things that are actually popular with the majority of Americans, much like those with the ACA subsidy extensions. Historian Heather Cox Richardson sets some historical context with the filibuster originally being used to block civil rights legislation, then by Southern Democrats.
But pretty famously, we get the filibuster of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by Southern Democrats, and then you're going to get a major filibuster by Strom Thurmond, which is one maybe many people remember in the 1950s, the 1950s and the 1960s of the Civil Rights Act, by people trying to guarantee that we're not going to get civil rights legislation.
In more recent times, the use of the filibuster in the Senate has exploded. Here was a statistic cited by Joe Biden in the beginning of his presidency to outline just how often the filibuster is used to block legislation.
I had a card on this. I was going to give you the statistics, but you probably know them. That it used to be that from between 1917 and 1971, the filibuster existed. There were a total of 58 motions to break a filibuster. That whole time. Last year alone, there were 5 times that many. So it's being abused in a gigantic way.
It's basically used as a strategy or a game theory to block legislation and bring government to a halt. Barack Obama explained the problem during his presidency.
Public service is not a game. It is a privilege, and the consequences of action or inaction are very real. The American people deserve better than politicians who run for election telling them how terrible government is and then devoting their time in elected office to trying to make government not work as often as possible.
And in more recent time, the tool has been used by Republicans to target legislation by Democrats. Heather Cox Richardson provides some analysis.
So what that means is that the Republicans are perfectly happy with the filibuster the way it is, because they can then turn around and filibuster the legislation the Democrats want, because we're at this extreme point in American politics where the Republican Party really would like to stop the federal government from doing anything. That's the idea. They want to go back to a system from before the time of Eisenhower and Teddy Roosevelt, back to the time before the liberal consensus, and they're pretty open about that.
This has an interesting impact on democracy, essentially giving the minority position undue power. She continues.
Because rather than there being the weight on the minority to have to take a big stand to stop something, to talk all night, for example, or to try and change people's minds, the weight of trying to get legislation through falls on the people who want to pass it, who actually have a majority. So it's much harder for the majority to actually get legislation than it is for the minority to stop legislation.
While in the short term, many progressives may want to use the filibuster to slow down the Trump administration, GOP operatives know that removing the filibuster will allow progressives fresh off a blue wave responding to unpopular Trump administration policies to come back on a mission to create new laws to reform the system itself. I believe the system can work better without the filibuster. By making it easier to pass laws, we can make each one of them simpler and smaller. With such a high bar to pass any individual legislation, we get these big omnibus trillion-dollar bills that contain so many issues that even our congresspeople can't keep track of them. This year, for example, we did not get the opportunity to review simpler laws around healthcare, Medicaid, immigration, and other issues independently. Heather Cox Richardson discussed how, in the absence of widespread filibuster use, legislation was more of a daily incremental action.
And so let me tell you why some people now argue that we need it. And that's that they say that it forces the Senate to be bipartisan. That is, I cannot emphasize how wrong that is. And I'm a scholar of Congress. So believe me, I have read literally dozens, decades of congressional debates. And the answer is that if you have to pass things by a simple majority, it's understood that you're going to make changes largely incrementally, and that if you get egg all over your face, you're going to pay for it. So people say, oh, we're going to whiplash back and forth. But that's not all that happened when you actually had things passing by a simple majority. Things did change, and certainly people argued about things, but there was much more a sense of legislation being a daily process, and you would if you really screwed up, you pay for it at the next election. But there weren't these giant sweeps back and forth that we now have, where you have to have a supermajority to get something, so the legislation becomes extraordinary.
So with this appropriations bill, I am okay with the nuclear option to set a precedent to remove the filibuster for all legislative actions. Let's let the Republican leadership take responsibility for their partisan BBBA and continue their appropriation. Ideally, a few rank-and-file Republican senators could get a conscience, depart from their leadership in the absence of a filibuster, and side with the 47 Democrats to extend the ACA subsidies in a smaller bill. For the longer term, I like what Obama said about the future.
We know that there are folks there, Republican and Democrat, who want to get things done. And frankly, privately, they've expressed to me their recognition that the system in the Senate had broken down, and what used to be a sporadic exercise of the filibuster had gotten completely out of hand.
He continued how on everything should work.
And if there are differences in the Senate, then debates should be had. People should vote their conscience. They should vote on behalf of their constituents. But they should vote. That's what they're there to do. And ultimately, if you've got a majority of folks who believe in something, then it should be able to pass.
I call on us as Americans to demand the basic set of priorities in the legislature so we can start passing better laws, fix our system, and return ourselves to a functioning 3 branches of government. So that's it for this week. I'll be interested in your thoughts too. See you next week.